So I finally started saying no to things that I don't want to do. And let me tell you, it is refreshing.
Yeah.
Somebody's like, oh, do you want to go out like after work? Like it's like work people. I'm like, no. They're like, oh, do you have like plans? I was like, no.
I just
Don't
to.
want to see you.
I'm okay.
And it's so refreshing once you start doing that because it's like
You're putting your mental health first.
Right. Like I spend so much time with you guys all the time. Like I don't
just wanna
need
go home.
Right. I just want to go home, snuggle my cats, and like do other things that actually make me happy, not like spend more time with people that I don't really like that much.
Yeah.
Right.
My coworkers.
Right. Like I just, it's refreshing once you finally like start. But I've always been like a yes girl. Like I don't know about you guys, but I've
A
always
people
been,
pleaser?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I've always like,
agree.
oh, you
Me
want to do
too.
this? You want to do this? Yes, 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 yes. I'll do it. And then I always hate myself because I'm always so busy. And so once you start finally saying no, it's like,
You
the
know,
best
I
thing.
probably should start saying no to them.
You have to.
I do.
It's so.
I used to
nice.
hate like the feeling of like hurting people's feelings, like
Yes.
letting them down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would be like, okay, what if they get upset at me, whatever. So then I kind of like wouldn't respond, and I'd be like, well, crap. Now I look more guilty.
Right.
Or,
No response is truly worse than just saying no.
Yeah. Now I've learned to just be honest. Be like, hey, like I just don't feel like doing it, like whatever,
I'm guilty.
But it took me a long time to, yeah.
You're guilty.
I
You
think
ghost
guys
people.
realize- I mean, I'm so bad at responding just in general. I feel like I talk to people all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's like,
no, it's true. It's
Sometimes
like,
I just need that mental break. Like I can't be on my phone. I just need some time.
Speaking of that, so there was an article that I saw, I think it was on BuzzFeed, that Gen Zers are silencing their phones to like avoid anxiety and stress. And so like I silence my phone on accident, like once it's like 8 o'clock, I think it's like my bedtime or wind down hour. I don't know what Apple does, but they're doing it like all day. So they don't get like any text messages or anything like all day.
All day is crazy, but
Right. Like I
It
feel
is
like
kinda
that's, and it's just so that they can feel unplugged, because there's perception of like being unplugged means that you have less stress and anxiety.
Because you don't really see like, I mean, I can see both sides because I understand balance. Like I'm big on balance. So like you said, at 9 p.m. I'll usually do the do not disturb or whatever it is till the morning time. And I'm like, no phone, nothing. But I actually read like I think the same article, and it was
Yeah.
talking about like their depression, their anxiety, all that
Yeah.
stuff, like what it stems to.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with like the comparison to what you see on your phone. Because like when we grew up, we didn't have like the biggest social media base. Like we didn't have the TikTok, the Facebook, the Snapchat, like all that stuff to compare constantly. And now it's like, but I will say though, I also think they're being more aware of mental health. Like when we grew up, mental health was not
It wasn't
a talked about
No.
thing. Like it was like whatever you're
Yeah.
going through, you just keep it
Yeah.
inside. You keep it in your house. Like in different communities have different rules and different boundaries. And like what I'm learning is like, it's okay to not only say no to people, but it's also okay to be honest and be like,
Right.
look, like I'm going through this right now. Like just let me be for a little bit and I'll come talk to you when I'm ready, if that makes sense. Like that's what I've learned personally.
you're not wrong for that.
Like
No. Yeah.
no, I'm very big on teaching my children's emotions too, because I feel like when we grew up too, it
love
was
that.
like you have anger and you have happiness and like there's nothing in between.
Right.
So it's like, no, like there's sadness, there's anxiety, there's anxious, there's, all these emotions that we weren't taught.
Yeah.
And now we're just like the generation of like not knowing how to control your emotions. Like, well, we had to teach ourselves that, like
Yeah.
the mental health,
Yeah.
all that stuff. So
And some of it you didn't even know what you were experiencing until you got older, and then you look
Exactly.
back on, or like you go see a therapist.
Yeah.
Not talking from experience, but you're like,
Same.
oh, you're
The
like,
door's open.
I was actually feeling that way, 25 years
Right.
ago. Oh my gosh.
It all
like
makes sense.
that all
Yes.
makes sense now why I am the way I am. But like, I mean, just going back to the technology thing, it's weird because I usually spend that like 9 to like question mark hours of the night like death scrolling on my phone. So like the silencing my messages and stuff is one thing, but then like you still have the part of social media where it's like I'm like scrolling for hours and hours on my phone and feeling anxious for some reason.
Right.
Do you guys get that? Like,
So actually, it's funny because one of my New Year's resolutions was going to sleep with no screen time. So like now when I
love
go to
that. I
sleep,
tried.
like I cut my phone up at 9 o'clock and I'll either like read a book or I will literally put on like soft music and try to meditate, because like it's a proven thing that also too, like the 30 minutes before you go to sleep, you want your brain as calm as can be.
Yeah.
And if you are on the screen right before you go to sleep, you're going to usually go to sleep with like the last thing that you saw, last thing you watched, or like you're thinking about, oh my gosh, like they posted this, what they mean by that, like why can't I be there, like
Yeah.
and that anxiety. But
People's vacations.
right,
Oh.
one other
Congrats, you're on
thing
vacation, and I'm not.
sucks to suck. Another thing is like in Rockford and Illinois in general, our mental health like advocates and help is very low.
That's true.
And I mean there's becoming more like there's more therapists and stuff like that.
There's more resources than there was like 10 years
But
ago.
again, it's about
Yeah.
what money you have, what insurance you have.
Sure,
Like, you
yeah.
know, but even like with mental health, a lot of people don't understand is it's not always you're born with it. Like everyone thinks like, oh, you were just born that way. Like, oh, you're just born that way. It's like, no. Like there's PTSD in multiple different forms. There's
Yes.
triggers in multiple different forms. And it's like the slightest change in your life, whether you're having a child or you're about to get married or like you go through a breakup, it's like that could literally trigger a manic depressive episode, you know, or like bipolar could kick in anytime. And it's
Yeah.
like you go to try to get help and they're just like, oh, well, you have to experience A, B, C, D before they even take you serious. And it's like, okay, well, what do you want me to do now?
Yeah. Yeah. And then you just like sit with it and then, you know, WebMD yourself to death.
Seriously, like you become your own doctor.
Right. Like just wait for the word cancer to pop up. Yeah.
No, I 100% agree. Like also for me, like working out is a huge release for my mental health and my sanity to just be like, okay, like I know I need to take a break and that is my break, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like I keep myself busy to like
Yeah.
steer away from the things that I'm going through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So with that, what happens when you calm down?
What do you mean?
Like you say you keep yourself busy to kind of like,
As long as I got every single thing
Oh,
done
yeah.
throughout the day that I feel like I needed to get done,
right.
I'll be fine.
So when you calm down and relax, do thoughts pop up of like, you could be doing this better, doing that more? Like do those
Yeah,
thoughts
I feel like
like,
I'm always like,
Are you a list person?
no.
No.
me
absolutely
neither.
not.
Absolutely
Oh,
not.
I'm a
I
list
hate
person.
no.
lists. feel
I
like
have to have a list.
Yeah.
I try.
I'm
I
a
feel
list
like
person.
Personally, for me at least, I feel like I'll just procrastinate. If I have a list, I'll just sit there and look at it.
Yeah, same.
And I
You
won't- I
overthink the
won't-
list.
Yeah, I
Yep.
overthink it and I won't check anything off. Like I just
Really?
Yeah, I kind of just go with the flow and just
So I used to do a list because I thought like, oh, like I'm gonna do a to-do list. Like I had the journals and everything.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my therapist one day and I was like, dude, like these are not working. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I have a list every weekend of like things to do and I don't get a thing done. And she's like,
What are you doing instead?
where do you start? Overthinking the list.
Overthinking
Like I'll be like,
Like,
I'm like, okay, well, how am I gonna get to subject 10 if I have to do all this stuff first? I'm like, you know, like this is a lot of stuff
Yeah.
to do. Like I literally sit there and overthink it.
right.
And I was like, well, what can I do? And, you know, and again, with growing up, like we weren't big on like the ADHD, like all that stuff, like the medication, you know, we just had to learn to deal with it. And now looking back, I'm like, crap, like I probably have had ADHD my whole life
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
never thought of it.
Went
Never
undiagnosed
Yeah,
and
seriously. So now I'm sitting here like, okay, you know, finally like getting the help I need and it is helping me and I'm able to do things, but I'm like, why is it like bipolar or schizophrenia or whatever have to be the only mental health issues that people look at when there's way
Yeah.
more that to consider, and that especially with women, especially with like moms or whatever, it's like you go through so much and nobody even thinks to be like, hey, like, are you doing okay?
Yeah.
Like check on your strong friends.
yeah.
Where's that at?
Important.
Right.
You
I know.
know?
No. So like me and my friends do this thing where we're like checking on each other and we're just like, hey, like just a wellness check, like just
Yeah.
making sure y'all are okay. Cause like this winter was really hard. This
That
winter was
seasonal
hard on like
depression.
seasonal depression hit
agree.
hard.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so much that I was like depressed over anything. It was more of like I just didn't want to do anything. And I just felt really overwhelmed by even just like the simplest thing that I had to
Same.
do. I was just like, I don't want to do any of this. Like, I'd rather just like sit on the couch
And do nothing.
and do nothing. But I'm a list person. So like I need to have a list to like check off. Otherwise I don't feel like I accomplished anything because I have really severe OCD. Like
Yeah.
I have like tics and like OCD, like it's really, really bad. So like if I can I have to segment my day into like tasks and I have to complete those tasks. And that way I'm like hyper focused on that one task. So I don't think about like anything else.
And it's so crazy how different everybody is.
It's
how
so
we all
weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
do things our own ways, but it works. It works
Yeah.
for us.
Well, and that's again with the mental health thing is like people like to categorize like how people are supposed to think and how people are supposed to operate and how they're supposed to
react and-
feel.
yeah.
And it's just like
People don't work that way.
people don't work that way.
Yeah.
And even with you
Everyone's different.
related to the education, when you're working with children and teachers are like, the kids just don't listen, da da da. It's like, well, are you looking at those children as individuals or a class as a whole? And like what's really going on and how they learn and like what they could possibly be going through. It's like mental health starts at a young age
right.
and it's in different ways.
Well,
Like,
let's not even mention that the fact that the school system hasn't really changed for 50 plus years. I mean, the way that we teach our children is
yeah.
basically the same, but the world has changed
So
right?
much.
Like that's a whole nother topic of conversation. But and I don't even have kids, right? And I have a lot of
Yeah,
on this,
no, I
but-
agree 100%.
But you know, how can you expect like a kid to be in a classroom for 8 hours, up to 8 hours a day without any like technology, without any whatever, and then, you know, come home and that's all that they're in front of. No
Right.
wonder these kids have like ADHD. I don't even
It's
think they, I don't think they have-
overstimulated, like,
right. I don't
yeah.
even think they have ADHD. I think they're just used to having so much stimulation around
Yes.
them that when they go in a classroom, you can't physically just sit. We didn't have
Right.
that. We didn't have
Right.
that when we were in school. So it's like what do you expect? You know, like of course they're gonna have ADHD.
Right.
Everyone has ADHD.
Yes.
I
Well, and again, it's like the different generations. Like when we grew up, we, you know, maybe had anxiety, we maybe had whatever. But I
Yeah.
do feel like, you know, a lot of younger kids and whatever, they're being more exposed to things, which also cause more anxiety, which also cause more like anger or comparison
it's so
or
hard to keep your kids from seeing things
What's
that you
going
don't
on,
want them to
right.
see, you know, like I feel like it's impossible.
yeah,
Yeah. How do you like navigate the world of like social media with kids?
hope and
I don't
pray.
have kids, so I don't know. like,
Honestly.
how do you do like?
I mean, I do think I'm very blessed that my generation in particular is more aware of signs and signals of mental health to know like, hey, like this person may need help. That person may need help. Like what has changed in them? Like, what are you noticing? And when you're around somebody for like a long time and you start noticing they don't answer your phone call anymore. They haven't texted you back in like 6
Yeah.
days or they're not showing up for
Right.
whatever. It's like, don't just take it as, oh, well, they're just going through something.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, those are the people that need help the most. And again, it's like with, at least in Rockford and Illinois, you know, we lost our institute here a few years back. And it's like, where do you expect these people to go?
Right.
Because county and jail, that's not helping them.
no.
Nobody's making sure that they're
making it
okay
worse.
there. Yeah.
That's not therapy.
Right. And it's like
people need
you
therapy.
look at them as criminals and it's like, no, like they didn't ask to be born with a brain advancement.
Right.
You know, and you don't know what they've gone through. Like these kids, and what literally blows my mind is the labeling different communities. Like you have, per se, like a white kid who grew up, does a crime, whatever. People are like, oh, like, well, he just had a bad day or his parents got divorced, da da da. And you have a black kid who commits a crime, like, oh, like, he shouldn't have been doing that. He's a thug or he grew up poor. Like, go figure he's the way he is. And it's like, well, mental health is everywhere. It doesn't
Yeah.
have a race on it. It doesn't have an income on it. It doesn't have
Yeah.
an age on it.
But I feel
It's
like the way that certain communities deal with mental health is inherently different.
Oh, 100%.
100%.
100%.
And just the way that communities look at other communities' mental health is,
Well, it's also male versus female.
oh, yeah.
Totally different. Like,
Oh.
you know, males, you know, ego, pride, whatever it may be. It's like, it's okay. Nobody says you have to be strong. That's the thing too, is
Right.
like, I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, well, men are supposed to be this, men are supposed to be that. And it's like, okay, well, who's checking on them?
Right.
Who's making sure they're okay? Who's making sure that they're, you know, taken care of? Or if they're having a bad day or they're going through some tough stuff, it's like,
Yeah.
who can they lean on?
And mental health, like in a partnership, like in a relationship, is something that I feel like people don't talk enough about.
Right.
Like when you're in a relationship, like you both are going to have good days and bad days.
Yeah.
For yourself, like not even talking about like not even having anything to do with the other person that you're with. Like I'm not even mad at you.
Right.
I'm just like mad.
I'm
You know what
going through my
I'm
thing.
just going through something.
Right.
Like it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Right. It's like I'm at 50%. That's where I'm at. So I
Right.
need you to pick up the other 50%. You know what I mean? 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm not. And so like this past week, my boyfriend was at, 20%. And I had to pick up, the 80%.
Which at
I'm
least
just
you
like,
acknowledge that.
yeah, I'm like, okay, I get it. Because there's been plenty of days where I'm like 10%,
Right.
or 0%. I'm just like, I just need
I'm not
to
here.
I'm not here. I don't want to be like, I just need to sit on the couch all day. And he knows, like, don't ask me, like, what are you doing today? Like, because that's triggering me because I'm like, I already feel like crap. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, I don't need somebody to asking me, like, what are you doing? Why are you just sitting on the couch, you lazy person? Like,
And I feel
I
when you're in a relationship, you get so used to just like
Certain like
Pleasing them.
expectations. Or, yeah.
Yeah,
pleasing
yeah,
them. So
yeah.
you
Well, that's why
have
it's
to-
important to kind of know, like, when you know your partner, like, you know when things are off.
Yeah.
And, like, it's easy to be like, okay, well, did I do it? Are you
Yeah.
mad at me? And it's like, well, no, like,
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn myself to just be like, it's okay to be silent.
Yeah.
It's okay to go to another room and be like, hey, we don't have to spend every second together.
Mm-hmm.
Because I always thought like that's just what relationships do. Like if you don't do it, like there's obviously an issue. And it's like,
Right.
I had to learn myself, like, and
You
I
need your
also had to,
space.
and I also
Yeah.
had to learn, like you said, different communities deal with mental health completely different. And like, my husband being Black, talking to his whole family, they didn't talk about things. They
Right.
didn't, it wasn't acceptable per se to have anxiety, to have mental health, to have whatever. Like they just wanted to survive.
Right.
They didn't have
Right.
time to go to the therapy. They didn't have the money to go, the resources, whatever. Like granted, we didn't do it either growing up in my household, but I had plenty of friends that were, the second they showed anxiety, their parents were like, oh my God, let's go talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Let's go put you on medicine. Like, let's go, and it's like, okay,
Oh.
which,
I wish.
I mean, but it's just crazy because
Yeah.
it's like a lot of that stuff people think like, oh, okay, well, if the parents don't have it, the kids won't have it. And it's like, well, that's not how that always works. And one thing I read was Cardi B posted an article about when Offset lost, a brother. And it was like, I've been through that. When my husband's cousin passed away, it's like when you watch person you love lose somebody they love,
Yeah.
the toll that takes on them, and it's like you'll never get that peace back. So it's like here I am trying to be like, okay, what can I do to make them feel better? But in reality, like there's nothing except
Yeah.
just be there for them. Let them go through the grief that they need to go through, and just know like I'm just here.
Yeah.
But it changes them. It physically, mentally, like it just changes them,
that's
and it's
another
hard.
thing. You do have to give them their space
Right.
when they're grieving so they can go through each step.
Right.
Yeah.
And not force them to talk when
Exactly.
you want them
I'm
to
so
talk.
bad at that.
Yes.
I'm like, let's talk. Let's fix it. What do you want to do?
I'm
Let's
the
fix it. I
same
want to fix
way.
it. I want to fix you. Let's
And
do
that-
it.
that's
Give me a
also-
checklist.
Yeah. Give me a list. I'll do the list. I promise.
I'll do it step by step. No,
know,
I was
it's
the
100. That's a
same
good
way. Well, yeah, and you have to learn, like, again, with every human, we're all different. So what may work for you may not work for the next person.
Yeah.
And you can't expect it to. So it's like learning to just be like, all right, well,
Yeah.
here's my suggestion. Here's my advice. Either you can take it or leave it, whatever. But you can't get mad if they're just like,
Yeah.
well, that didn't work for me.
Right.
Or that sounds stupid, so.
Right. Everybody can take their own advice how they want to. And, if they don't want it, they don't want it. They don't have to do it. I actually went through a similar thing with my dad, actually. I think 2 years ago, his dad, he was kind of estranged from, I had only met him one other time, his real dad. And his real dad actually just recently passed. And he didn't really make amends with him at all. He probably had only seen him a couple times since he was like an grown adult. But I had the fortune of meeting him once. And he was going through this horrible grief, but also like this insane guilt.
Yeah.
Right. Because he didn't ever like
The
amend
regret,
anything.
like,
yeah,
yeah.
amend anything of like what could have been. Right. And like having to talk through my dad, who does not talk about mental
Right.
health at all and has never talked about mental health like growing up. It was kind of nice for us to sit down and talk and be like, what are you going through?
Right.
And for like a child to do that to a parent, like that's okay.
Yeah.
Like you
That is-
check in on your parents too, because
I
they probably
agree,
were,
yeah.
They're
they
human.
probably were taught to like not
Those tables turn
Right.
before you even realize they're
Yes.
turning.
And you know, they were taught the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
don't talk
Don't
about your
talk about
feelings.
it.
You know, don't do that. You know, especially like Gen Xers, Boomers. Like, I mean, my
Yes.
parents are Boomers. So like,
Yeah.
it was very eye opening to me to see them kind of, you know, express themselves
yeah.
in that way and actually have that feeling and tell me that like, yeah, I regret this. Like, this is a regret I have. And it's a nice conversation if the other person is willing to have it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess like to that point, we should just all be willing to have those conversations and not put a stigma on talking about mental health, because I try to bring it up whenever it's appropriate, obviously. Like talking about like, hey, how are you doing this week? I'm not going to say, I'm good. How are you? Like, if I'm not good, I'm not going to say I'm good. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
I'm such an open book. Like, you
Yeah.
can ask me a question and you're gonna get the honest
Yeah.
answer.
like most of the time I'm like, you know,
Plus,
like,
it feels good to know. Like, I'm that friend that, like, will, I don't know, like, I get kind of like intuition feelings where I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, hey, I'll call my friend, like, what's going on? And she'll be like, well, what are you talking about? Like, whatever. And I'm like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Right.
And she's like, well, actually, like, this happened. And, like, you know, like, I heard about this. You know, the kids
Right.
are sick. We're not doing good over here. And I'm just like, do you need anything?
right.
Like, you know, or I'm like a positive reinforcement person. I'll message my friends and be like, hey, like, I just want to let you know, like, you're doing great. Like, you're a great mom. You're a great
Words of
friend. Like, yes, like, I'm a huge word of affirmation person. Like, that is like my love language.
That's good.
And I'm just like, because like you never, you never know, like, who doesn't hear those things. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like, okay, well, if you're not going to hear it from people you maybe should hear it from, like, you're going to hear it from me.
Yeah.
Like, and it could be because like I kind of grew up in the opposite, where I had one of each parents. Like, I had my mom that was more like, hey, like, do you need to talk? And I had my dad that was just like, I don't know how to have this emotional conversation, so therefore I'm not going to have it. And I'm like, okay, well, cool. Like,
down.
yeah, he shuts down. So I always used to look at him again with growing up. I always looked at it as like, Dad, like, why don't you want to have these talks? Like, do you just resent it? Like, is it something that I did? Like, what I used to look at him as like kind of like an anger where I'm like, okay. But when I went to therapy, I kind of learned like he grew up where those conversations did not happen. So he didn't know how to have
to
them.
express
And then
them,
when
yeah.
he
Yeah.
became an adult
Made
and
him
a parent,
uncomfortable.
right, and he didn't teach himself to be like, hey, like, this isn't how I want to kind of like raise my kids, or this isn't how I want to be as a father or a
wasn't
husband.
equipped for that.
Right. So with me, I'm kind of like, okay, well, what can I do to look in the mirror and be like, okay, I want to become the better version of myself. I want to
Right.
become the best version of a mom, a wife, or a friend, whatever it may be. And I'm willing to take on the, you know, changes, whatever it may be, to become that. But you also have to be like, okay, well, you need to change how you do this.
Yeah.
Right.
You need to change how you do that. Like, my biggest thing was like balancing. Yeah. I had to learn to balance like everything around me, because I would get very overstimulated and I would get angry, and like that was all I knew.
Right.
Instead of just being like, hey, like, I need a minute, like, you know, like, I always expect people to know what I was going through.
Right.
So I never
Without
talked about
expressing
it. Right. But now I'm like, hey, like, I just need a couple minutes. Like, I'll call my grandma, my mom, or something, like, hey, can you take the kids for just like a half an hour? Like, I need to like reset, regroup. And me, I'm big on drives. I will take a drive on an open road,
Aw.
put some music on, and I'm like,
We should
just
take this show on the road. We should
oh,
do like a
I'm
dash
big
cam
on
show.
drives. Like,
Cam show.
I am huge on that. Like, give me my little old school R&B music,
Yes.
hit the
Yeah.
road, window down a little bit. I'll return happy, I promise. Like,
But it's better when it's not like snowing and stupid out there.
yeah,
But,
I agree. The Midwest makes it hard. Yeah, but I am proud that like our generation seems to be more aware of how serious mental health is and can be, and how quick and fast it may either make or break somebody. And I think we're kind of like breaking some of those generational curses where it's like, all right, like I don't want my children to think like you can't come to me because I'm your mom.
I feel like me and my kids, we have a very good like mutual understanding.
Yes.
Like they're 5 and 4, but like they just know like my mom is my comfort, you know.
Right.
That's all I ever want.
And it's like, it's those boundaries, like it's the line, like, yes, I will be there for you, but like, I'm still your mom. Like you still have to respect me, like whatever.
Right.
But I would never, ever, I couldn't imagine not being able to like be there for my children.
Talk to your kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, I understand the whole I'm here to do this, I'm here to do that, like whatever. But I don't know, like I just couldn't imagine not being able to open up and just be like, all right,
Yeah.
let's have a talk.
Right. Yeah. So I feel like we just unlocked so many different things. Let's recap. Okay. Mental health, social media,
Boundaries.
undiagnosed
Boundaries.
trauma,
Yes.
boundaries,
That undiagnosed trauma will get you, man.
parenting. There's a whole bunch of stuff
Yeah.
packed in one. I mean, I'm curious to hear like what you guys think, out there about just mental health, and if you guys have, obviously been diagnosed or like think that you have something that you haven't been diagnosed, or think you've been gone undiagnosed for
If
so
we
long.
opened your door,
Right. Let us know. Yeah, let us know. So till next time, guys.
Until next time.